Hi everybody, this is Shannon from Gardenstead. Today I'm going to take you through some of my flower gardens. We're going to cut flowers from the garden and I'm going to show you how to make an easy mason jar arrangement that you can bring inside. So the first thing I do is I fill a large bucket full of water so that as I'm cutting everything, I'm putting them directly into the water. You always want to use the sharpest scissors that you have. These are really great garden shears that I buy. They're Japanese, incredibly sharp. I've cut my fingers multiple times from them, but they really give you the greatest, cleanest cut for the flower. Make sure you disinfect them before you start cutting in case you use them on other things. And we're just gonna start going around based on what's growing right now. I'm thinking we're gonna do like a lavender, whites, and peaches arrangement. So I'm gonna skip through some of what I've got. I'm gonna cut this delphinium in here. It's a very small stem that I'm gonna cut this. With delphiniums, if you cut your main stem and leave it, it'll put energy into creating more stems. They might not be as big and as long as the first stem that you've had, but as you can see, they're still very pretty. So we're gonna use that. We're gonna put in some Russian sage, which is here. While I'm in the garden, I'm gonna pull off some of the green leaves so that they're not gonna go in the water. As you're cutting your flowers, try to keep as long of a stem length as possible, just so that you can cut it down as you go, but you wanna make sure that you've got them long enough. So this is Russian sage. It's got like a triangle spikier leaf, and when it opens up and blooms, it's a little bit more blue than the lavender. The lavender is a little bit more purple. The lavender also blooms in a clump and has long, skinny leaves. If you're ever unsure, just smell the two. That's lavender, and that's sage. So this here is Apple of Peru. It's a really nice filler flower. This is the first year that I've grown it. It blooms these really gorgeous little purple blooms that fall out, but then leaves you with these really, really interesting sort of ornamental seed pods. So we're gonna put, there's the bloom that fell out, but then you get the seed pod. So we don't want the arrangement to be too green, but we're gonna put one stem of this in here. So I'm gonna put some Cosmos in this arrangement. Not everybody loves Cosmos because I don't think they last very long in the vase, but there's a trick to know which Cosmos to use. Cosmos will last a lot longer in the vase when you cut them in this stage. And the way to tell is, do you see how yellow that center is and it's quite flat? This flower is just starting to open. The bees haven't gotten into it and it's really fresh. Whereas this flower, you can see it's quite tall and bulbous. It's got some darker spots in the center. There's pollen. The bees have gotten in here. This flower is a little bit older and will not last very long in a vase. So always cut when they're quite yellow and flat in the center for the longest vase life. I love sort of the bluer tone of the sage. It's a softer green. I use the mint if I want like a brighter green in the foliage. And then I like to use the Thai basil. It's a bit darker for a more moodier arrangement, but this looks great. The color tones are really nice with the whites and the blues. This is the front where I've got experimental farm, as I like to call it, because everything in the front is in pots. So there's nothing that, there's no ground, as you can see. So I've had to make do with the space I have. I grow all of my snapdragons in giant canvas bags, and then I stake and net them like they would be in the ground, like a long row of flowers. So it's worked really well. This is the first year I've grown them this way, and it's been amazing. I love sweet peas because they really are easy. They take a while to sort of get going. When you put them in the ground, they're these skinny little things, and then as they sort of find their trellis, they get really strong and thick. It's a Victorian flower. Not a lot of people continue to grow it. The blooms are quite small, but they are the most fragrant bloom. So these ones are called blue shift, which are crazy because they bloom this dark color and then over time they fade to blue. So on one stem, you get all these different shades because you get one bloom that opens first and then a second. Like this one just opened. You can see it's like hot pink and purple. And like compared to that, that's what it's gonna fade to. I just think they're amazing. But I'm gonna bring you to Ruthie's yard, which is down the street, which is where all the dahlias are growing and they're just starting to open up. This dahlia is gonna be perfect. So we're gonna cut this guy. With dahlias, you can cut as low down as you want, but I try to only cut the size of the arrangement I'm gonna be doing, because I want all of these little buds to open. So I'm gonna lose the buds, the flowers here and here, but what am I gonna do with the stem that short? So we're gonna rip these guys off. And that is an amazing stem. So we have cut all the flowers. I've laid some of them out on the table, some are still in the bucket, and we're gonna get started. What I usually do, we're working in a mason jar right now, which has a very small opening. So we're gonna do more of a hand-tied bouquet sort of style. So we're gonna start with our greenery. We're gonna start and build a bit of a frame. So what we wanna do is start creating a bit of what the shape is gonna be before we start adding more of the flowers in. So because I have some of these really lovely longer stems, I think what we'll do is something that has a bit more of a diagonal feel to it. So I'm crisscrossing my stems and pulling the leaves off anything that's below my fingers. So anything below my fingers is probably gonna be in the water. We don't want it in the water. So we're going to just sort of start like this. I'm gonna take some of this Snow on the Mountain, which is just starting to get really nice in color, and we're just gonna start creating a bit of a shape. So I always start with my greenery flowers first. It also is gonna help me with my frame. I either put them directly into the water or I'm gonna continue to hold them like this. And I'm doing it sort of facing you guys, so you'll see what I'm doing. And you just sort of want to keep crisscrossing your flowers. So there's always sort of a center point, and the stems are coming out that way. I'm gonna fill in some of these taller stems up in here. And don't be afraid to sort of move things around, try a bit differently. I tend to do this facing me, but I'm trying to do it facing you so you can see what I'm doing. So this is a Dahlia. This is gonna be one of our focal flowers. So I'm gonna position that right in the center. So you can see I'm sort of starting with a bit of a shape. I'm gonna pull the bucket up now. And some of what we cut, I think, is a little bit too bright for these more muted tones. So we're gonna continue with more of the peachier colors. Got this gorgeous delphinium. I'm gonna filter in right down in here. Oops. I can see different spots where I want a little bit more color. Oftentimes as I'm doing it, I think, oh, that stem's too long. I can pull like the sweet peas. I'm gonna shorten them a little bit. And also there's times where I think, okay, that color's a little bit too, some colors are a little bit too saturated, so we don't wanna use them. But now that I've got my shape, I'm just gonna continue to sort of fill in where I feel like it needs a little bit more color and design. And I've got one beautiful rose that I'm going to focal right in behind this Dahlia so that as it continues to open, it'll fill that space gorgeous. All right. Sometimes, even though we cut a lot, less is more sometimes. So we don't want it to be too busy. We've got a really nice sort of diagonal linear line here that we're gonna continue with. Sometimes I just fill a couple other stems in the back just so that it sits better in the vase. Some of our greenery stems just help to fill it out. I tend to do my arrangements like this one has a front. The back's not very interesting, but we want it to look exciting from the front. These are a bit too, I think, a bit too pinky, so we're not gonna use those. So then at this point, this is where I'm holding it. I'm gonna make sure that nothing leaf-wise is below my hands. I'm gonna measure where I want it to sit, and all those other stems are gonna need to be cut off. So I sort of put the vase down. Where my hand is should be the center, and everything below that needs to be cut. I'm gonna continue to cut all of these stems so that it sits comfortably. I'm not gonna hand tie this. I don't think it needs to be hand tied, but you certainly can. I'm gonna put it in the vase. And I'm not gonna let go until I make sure I've cut it short enough. No, I want it to be a little shorter so that it really sits in there. And then once it's in the vase, you can just move things around a little bit. If you find it's not sitting well, that's when I'll sometimes put some other flowers in the back just to give it a little bit more strength to stay in balance. Okay, so thank you for joining me. I hope you learned some easy tips and tricks. Don't be afraid to cut your flowers from your garden. A lot of flowers like the Cosmos and the zinnias, they're cut and come back flowers. The more you cut, the more they're gonna produce. So bring them inside, make an arrangement and enjoy them.